Welcome in, everyone. Grab a seat. I'm so excited to be your guide for today's reading lesson. We are unpacking a truly fascinating explainer today called Why I'm Sorry Doesn't Always Translate. Have you ever apologized to someone totally thinking you were doing the right thing, only to have it completely backfire? Yeah, me too. Well, today we're going to dig into the deep semantic disconnect of the word sorry across different cultures. It is a universal word, right? But as you're going to see, it carries entirely different baggage depending on where you are in the world. So, let's dive right in.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the authors and the text itself, move into a quick summary of the article, and then we'll do a paragraph-by-paragraph breakdown. After that, we'll review some vocabulary and exercise answers, explore the overarching themes, and finally wrap up with the central message.
All right, let's kick things off with Block 1, Authors and the Text. So before we read a single word, we really need to understand who wrote this. And let me tell you, these aren't just casual bloggers sharing their opinions. These are absolute heavy hitters in the academic world. We've got William Maddox from INSEAD Business School, an expert in cross-cultural psychology. There's Peter H. Kim from USC, who literally studies trust and apologies for a living. Tatoshi Okamura is a Japanese researcher specializing in U.S.-Japan negotiations. And Jean Brett from Northwestern University is a guru in global negotiation and conflict resolution. This piece was originally published in the Harvard Business Review, so right off the bat, we know we're dealing with rigorously researched top-tier insights.
And the piece we're looking at today perfectly illustrates our genre. It's a nonfiction, analytical article. But hey, it's not just dry theory. It's packed with real-world survey data comparing the East and the West, specifically America and Japan. The tone is definitely academic, but it's actually highly accessible.
Moving right along, let's get into Block 2, Summary of the Article.
The authors point out a massive, and I mean massive, core difference between two cultures that have otherwise worked together for decades. On one hand, we've got the American or Western view. Here, an apology is basically an admission of guilt. If I say I'm sorry, I'm essentially saying, yep, I'm guilty, I messed up. But on the flip side, we have the Japanese or East Asian view. To them, an apology is simply a tool to repair a relationship. There is absolutely no blame necessarily attached to it. It's just a way of saying, I want to fix this damaged harmony. Understanding this one fundamental difference, that is the absolute key to our entire lesson today.
Keep that huge contrast in the back of your mind as we dive into Block 3, paragraph-by-paragraph breakdown. So, Paragraph 1 hooks us right away with real-world examples of this exact problem. The text brings up a crazy incident from 2010 where Toyota CEO Akio Toyoda apologized for malfunctioning Prius accelerators. Americans were completely unmoved by it. To them, it just didn't carry the right weight. Now, contrast that with a 2001 incident where a U.S. submarine commander tragically sank a Japanese fishing boat. When the American commander didn't immediately apologize, Japan was outraged. They were deeply offended. You see, the Americans held back because they were worried about liability and guilt, whereas the Japanese just expected a quick apology to acknowledge the tragedy and try to mend the relationship. Wild, right?
Let's jump to Paragraph 2. The authors make sure to note that this isn't just a US versus Japan thing. Over in India, apologies are actually quite rare. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, apologies are so incredibly frequent and ritualized that people have pretty much become immune to them. It just goes to show that apology norms vary wildly all over the globe.
Okay, grab your pens because Paragraph 3 introduces the most crucial word of the day, culpability. You're going to want to write this down. Culpability is the fact of being responsible for a fault or a wrong. It literally means guilt. This single concept is the absolute root of why these cultural misunderstandings happen. Americans link apologies directly to culpability. The Japanese simply do not.
And the survey data from Study 1 in Paragraph 4? It is just fascinating. The Japanese students apologized an average of 11.05 times per week, and that's even when they weren't personally responsible. The American students, they recall just 4.51 apologies per week. The Japanese students are apologizing more than twice as much simply because they aren't tying that word to personal culpability.
Now, paragraphs 5 through 7 break down Study 2, and this is where the rubber really meets the road for the business world. They asked both groups to act as managers evaluating a job applicant who apologized for a past mistake on her tax return. What happened? Well, the Japanese managers saw the apology, trusted the applicant more, and totally wanted to hire her. But the American managers? They saw the apology, linked it straight to personal culpability, and actually doubted her abilities because she admitted she was guilty. So this American tendency to link apologies to blame actually hurts the apologizing job applicant in a Western context. No way, right?
Okay, class, shake out your hands, take a quick breath. We're moving into Block 4, vocabulary and exercise answers.
I'm going to pause for just a split second here. See if you can mentally guess the answers before I reveal them. Ready? Okay. If you have difficulty saying something clearly, you trip over your words. If you're accustomed to kind of harden to something unpleasant, you're inured to it. Kind of like those folks in Hong Kong who are inured to constant apologies. And if someone is showing way too much emotion or enthusiasm, they're being effusive.
Awesome job following along. Let's knock out the rest. A confident statement that something is true is an assertion. Something connected with the meaning of words, like the big disconnect we've been talking about today, is semantic. And finally, a very slight, subtle difference in meaning is a nuance. Excellent work checking your answers, everyone.
Let's step back and put our critical thinking caps on for Block 5, Themes of the Text.
The authors are really hitting on some massive themes here. First up is cross-cultural communication, literally how the exact same universal phrase carries completely opposite interpretations. Second is the perception of guilt and responsibility, which we now know is deeply rooted in Western individualism versus East Asian group harmony. Third, we have global business challenges. The text is flashing a huge warning sign that our rushed global drive to do business often recklessly ignores these deep cultural differences. And that naturally leads to the fourth theme, the absolute need for cultural awareness. Just having surface-level cooperation, it's simply not going to cut it anymore.
And that brings us to our final stop for today's lesson, Block 6, the central message.
I really want you to let this quote from the text sink in for a second. Words do not travel well across cultures, especially words as emotionally loaded as "I'm sorry." What feels like a super sincere apology to you might come off as a cold formality, an admission of legal guilt, or honestly, even an outright insult to someone else. True cultural empathy is an essential human skill. It's not just some slick business tactic. We really cannot just assume our words carry our intended meaning the second they leave our mouths.
So I want to leave you with this powerful reflection question today. The next time you find yourself in a cross-cultural interaction, before you speak and especially before you react defensively, ask yourself, does this mean the same thing in the other person's world as it does in mine? Taking a second to tune into those cultural nuances changes absolutely everything. Thank you so much for joining me for today's class. Keep exploring those nuances out there, and I will see you in the next explainer.